Durkin with We Are Change Connecticut out here in New Jersey, and we're here with artist and activist Clark Stoeckley, famously for his Twitter hashtag Wikileaks Truck. Clark, thanks for the interview, and just tell us about how you came up with the project, specifically with how you got involved in the activism and then mixing it with art and covering these important cases.
So I guess it happened in 2010. I was working on my thesis show for grad school, and I was using a lot of surveillance footage as well as footage from recent wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And a month before my show, Collateral Murder was published by Wikileaks. And I quickly downloaded that video and started editing it and putting it into my work. And from that point on, I kind of dedicated myself to bringing WikiLeaks and Bradley Manning, now Chelsea Manning's leaks into my work somehow. And so the first way I really did that was by buying a box truck from U-Haul and then painting it to say, the WikiLeaks Top Secret Mobile Information Collection Unit. And on the back it said Release Bradley Manning. And I drove around the White House, and I drove around D.C., the Pentagon, as well as the federal courthouse in Alexandria, Virginia, where the secret grand jury is been convened to prosecute WikiLeaks. And so, and then shortly thereafter, I moved up to New York, and I parked at Zuccotti Park for 2 months during Occupy Wall Street in fall 2011. And a month after the eviction, Chelsea Manning's Article 32 pretrial hearing started. And so, took that energy from Occupy Wall Street and organized a bus and went down to Fort Meade, Maryland. And that first day of the pretrial, I knew that the next step in my work would be to document as a courtroom sketch artist the trial. And so I was kind of digging deep into this old teaching that I had, back in art school of figure drawing, and I hadn't done figure drawing for nearly a decade. And so it was something I kind of had to search and repractice and kind of reteach myself how to do. And my first sketches were really rough, and I didn't quite have a handle on it until after coming down there a few times. And I got credentialed, and so I was allowed to sit in the jury box as well as both sides of the gallery, and in a remote press room, which was about a half mile away from the courtroom, which had a live feed with great angles, these kind of top angles that would pinpoint whoever was speaking. They were voice activated cameras. And so I went down there for 2 years, right before the actual trial started in June 3rd of 2013, 18 months after the pretrial started. I brought my truck down to Fort Meade for the first time, and I brought it down there for 2 months, drove it on base, and turned a lot of heads, dropped a lot of jaws. And in the last few weeks of the trial, I was kicked out of the courtroom and off the base. I tweeted, I don't know how they sleep at night, but I do know where. And I included a link to a hotel where I had been informed that the prosecution was camping out. And this information came to me because the lead prosecutor had been bragging about working on this case, and he'd been bragging about it to people who were staying in his hotel. And eventually that information came to me, and as a journalist, I felt inclined to report it. I felt like it was pretty odd that A, they weren't staying on base, but B, that they would be kind of promoting themselves or bragging or boasting about their work if they wanted to keep it secret to complete strangers. Why would they tell complete strangers who they were and why they were staying there? And so without knowing who they were, who they might talk to. And it was kind of this, trying to create this, I don't know, I create a situation where kind of bring up what is closely held information by the government. If the government, the prosecution didn't want us knowing where they were staying, then they should be more secretive about it. And this was the largest information assurance case in U.S. history, especially in military history. And and the definition of closely held was something that was brought up quite a bit. So the judge actually let me back in the courtroom, but the garrison commander would not let me back on base, which I found ironic because I had exposed, or I had publicly, published the location to an off-base, hotel, right? So if they were concerned about their safety or whatever, they should have just made sure I never went near their hotel or whatnot. So that happens, but I didn't lose too much sleep over it, and I was able to piece together the last few days of the trial using some friends who were keeping notes, and they were doing drawings, and then also some of the drawings I'd done previously became relevant again, and also there were publicly available photos of pretty much everyone who testified at the end. So that's how I was able to kind of piece together over 2 years using unofficial transcripts from Alex O'Brien and crowd-sourced, funded stenographers from the Freedom of the Press Foundation, for the trial portion this past summer, June, July, and August. Freedom of the Press were sending 2 stenographers each day and getting the closest thing to official transcripts that we had. Because this trial's, many of the documents, including transcripts, are still under seal. It's the most secretive trial in our history. Far more secretive than Gitmo hearings. And so, there's a lot that will be revealed in coming years and decades. I think it'll take decades before we find out much of what happens, especially in closed session, at this trial. And I felt that I had a sense of duty that the trial needed to be documented. We have all these cameras in, George Zimmerman's trial, right? Or Casey Anthony or whoever. Like any of these random people who just commit crimes that you read about on a daily basis here in Newark, New Jersey. Making national headline news, and meanwhile, you have somebody who created real headline news by leaking all this information to WikiLeaks, and the news wasn't necessarily about himself. It was about what was going on in our 2 wars in the Middle East, but also the State Department files, showed all sorts of corruption by various governments around the world. And this was headline news for the New York Times, on the front page, quite a bit, the things that Manning released thereafter. Was able to tell the full story to all these stories that they hadn't fully gotten correct. It seems like a year and a half ago, maybe, I first started getting into Jeremy Hammond's hearings. And Jeremy didn't have a full trial like Manning did. Kind of pled out to 10 years early on. And so much shorter, just a few days, but I've got some good drawings from inside. Was able to sit in the jury box there as well. But I'm going to try to tell a story that's a little bit bigger than one person's case. So I'm going to talk about LulzSec and I'm going to talk about Barrett Brown, and kind of show this whole process of how Barrett was this journalist kind of covering the things that LulzSec did, Anonymous were doing, and was definitely investigating the things that Jeremy had leaked, specifically about Stratfor and about strategic or Mantech and their subsidiaries and so forth, as well as HB Gary. And so I think we'll start with LulzSec. We'll get into Jeremy, and then that will lead us into Barrett Brown. And so, kind of connecting these all together into another graphic novel. A lot of it will be outside of the courtroom. However, I'm going down to Barrett Brown's trial. Hopefully both dates in April and May, and hopefully get a good seat and I'm able to cover that as well. But a lot of that has been kind of dealt with outside of a courtroom, the gag order, and then now they've dismissed all of the hyperlinking charges. So kind of see how that plays out. And I think we'll be able to tell a whole story that's a little bit more about this kind of this anonymous group. The traitor here is, instead of Adrian Lamo, it's Sabu, and it's a different twist. But also you kind of have these interesting two Midwestern boys, Jeremy Hammond, the Black Bloc anarchist, and then you've got the kind of libertarian, somewhat conservative Barrett Brown, who from Texas, the southern boy, and the comparison of the two, the straight cut, wearing a tie and a nice Oxford shirt and blazer, right? And you've got these two guys kind of in jail for being anarchists, and yet there's so much absurdity in both their cases. Specifically, in Jeremy's case, he had a judge whose husband was a victim of this crime, as the prosecution was claiming, right? And yet she wouldn't recuse herself. Jeremy's case, in Barrett's case, you've got these absurd hyperlinking charges which have been dismissed. But then we also have these threats to, Agent Smith, which were all conditional. They're all conditional threats. If this happens, then this is going to happen. Basically saying, if you break down my door and you come in my house, I don't know if you're a Zeta or if you're an FBI agent. I'm not going to wait to ask questions. I'm going to shoot first. And that's free speech, and that's been proven by several previous cases that have dealt with that line of what's a threat and what's free speech. And I believe clearly that Barrett did not cross that line. I've reviewed all the tapes, reviewed everything that they're using against him, and it doesn't seem to me like that. What it seems to me is they've just tried to slow him down on his work with Project PM. And so it seems to me that he'll probably get out, but the damage has been done. They've severely hindered his work by 2 years, and we'll see. I don't know. They've definitely probably frightened Barrett into not wanting to be an investigative journalist, for fear of whatever might happen again. And I think the investigation against him, the raids against him prior to him being arrested, are what should be investigated, not Brown himself. You know, it's very clear that Barrett Brown was not anonymous, right? You know, they're trying to say he was, and they're trying to say that Anonymous is a terrorist organization. You know, if Anonymous is a terrorist organization, then clearly the U.S. military is a terrorist organization, because Anonymous has not hurt anyone. They've taken down some websites. They've you know, defaced websites, and they've also hacked into emails, but no one's been hurt, and for the most part, it's always been for protest reasons, and so I also see a gross misinterpretation of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. I've seen that with Manning's case. I saw it with Andrew Onheimer's case, which was just 4 blocks down the street. weev is, you know, he's known. And then, you know, we're seeing it here with Barrett Brown's case. And so the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act is way outdated. We're living in the information age, digital age, and the last time that this law was kind of amended was in '96, right? Before that, it was a law that was introduced in 1986, before the internet. So there's a lot catching up to do. They haven't caught up to Web 2.0 or, you know, the under channels of the internet and how we share information, and so. These are things that need to be addressed because prosecutors and judges don't understand this law, and they're grossly misinterpreting it, and it's unfortunately leading to convictions that shouldn't, you know, have ever been brought up.
I would encourage everybody to go to our website, pressfreedomfoundation.org. You can learn more about these issues. You can learn how you can contribute to these great open source encryption projects, or contribute to us in a variety of ways. Get more informed, share information with your friends.
Dark path right now, and I don't know where it's leading. I can't believe that I'm representing whistleblowers who are facing criminal prosecution and who are living in exile in other countries because they've been granted asylum.